Hi, it's Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au, and we're back live. Mentioned earlier we're having a few problems with technology this evening. Well, we had the biggest problem of all. We had a power outage right in the middle of a sentence, halfway through our live monthly Q&A, about half an hour into this month's live Q&A. The power shut down for no particular reason in the neighbourhood, and then after about a minute it came back on again. Who knows why? So yeah, if there's anybody still out there tuning in, please send through your questions. I was actually in the middle of answering a question from one of our followers about Gladstone, and I was talking about what happened there. A lot of people invested in Gladstone because it was a major boom city, and for a couple of years, I guess around 2011, 2012, it had very strong price growth and rental growth as a result of the three major gas projects that were happening there, and the economic activity that that resulted from that, creating tens of thousands of new jobs. Developers piled in, created an oversupply, not fully understanding that a great many of those workers on those gas projects were staying in accommodation camps and not renting or buying local houses and apartments. So the market actually went a bit pear-shaped through oversupply, and rentals fell, vacancies rose, prices fell. So those people who still own real estate there and have been through a few tough years of pain with finding it difficult to find tenants, or if they can find tenants, at low rentals. And now a lot of people are asking, what's happening in Gladstone? Is it going to improve? Is it going to recover? When can we expect improvement? Well, I think the signs of better times are already there. The first one is that vacancies, which at one point were 10% or higher, are now down, getting very close to those levels when you can actually expect to be some prospect of rental growth. Last time I checked, it was still over 3%, but not much over 3%. And we are seeing an increase in sales activity, better times coming for Gladstone. So if you own property there and you've hung on this long, I'd suggest probably hanging on a bit more, because there are signs that it's improving. Inevitably it was going to. Gladstone is that kind of place, unfortunately. It is at the high risk end of property investment, because the nature of the city is that it's very hooked into the resources sector, and the resources sector is very cyclical, very volatile. So Gladstone's had boom bust scenarios before, and no doubt will again in the future. So it's been through a boom, then a bust, and now we're seeing perhaps the beginnings of recovery. So that's the nature of the beast. Unfortunately, if you own real estate there and you bought when things are up, and now finding that the property that you bought is worth less than you paid, but prospects for things to improve, I would suggest moving forward. Just got a question here, and I've just got to thanks for people for persevering. It's been really a night of frustrating technological problems, but particularly a power outage right in the middle of a broadcast is unhelpful. Fortunately, the power came back on, and I'm going to have another crack at it. And I've got a question here from Kevin about Riverstone, and it's a suburb of Sydney, and I'm just getting up on my book of maps. So it's up in that northwestern precinct. It's actually in the local government area of Blacktown, right next to the Hills Shire. But it's for northwestern suburbs, developing area. There's land up there for new development. And Kevin, you say you bought a small block of land, 375 square metres. It's not going up. It's a question of when you bought it, I suppose. There's no doubt that as a general rule, the growth in Sydney has come to a halt, and there's some evidence, and particularly in the prime end of the market, the prices are contracting a bit. There's some price correction going on. I think one of the factors up in that area that you're talking about, Riverstone. There's some other suburbs up there like Rouse Hill and Schofields. There's actually quite a lot of land there for development. And sometimes when you have an area, Marsden Park's a neighbouring suburb as well. When you look at I'm looking at a map of that area right now, Kevin, and one of the factors there is there's lots of land there available for development. It's right on that northwestern fringe. The Sydney's sprawl there is moving out that way, but there's lots of land available for development. So there's not a scarcity factor there. So you have a small block of land in an area where there's lots of small blocks of land for housing. And the other factor is that the Sydney growth cycle has come to an end. So that's going to suppress growth in that area. It's just a question of, I would need to know more about your circumstances, how much you paid, when you bought it, etc., as to whether it's a good idea to hang on to it or whether you should sell and try something else. We do offer strategy sessions, Kevin, where we can have a sort of one-on-one chat for 45 minutes, and I can get a full picture of the circumstances around that particular investment and get a better feel for your circumstances as to whether it would be a better idea to sell it or to hang on to it, or maybe not just hang on to it, but build something on it and sell that. But really do need to know more, and it's a little bit difficult to do that in this particular forum. Sarah has asked the question, can you talk about Northwest Tasmania? Yeah, one of the things I mentioned earlier before the power went off and I was rudely interrupted in my discourse, I was talking about the fact that we access raw data on sales volumes, and we look at we get them every quarter, and we look at patterns in every town, suburb, location around Australia, and we're analysing the latest batch right now. One of the things that stood out for us is that while it appears to us that Hobart, which currently is the strongest property market in capital city Australia, while it appears that sort of got to a peak and is probably now going to start soon tapering off, other parts of Tasmania are actually starting to rise, and this is a normal thing. We see it all the time. We saw it in Sydney and New South Wales. Sydney's winding down, but regional New South Wales is actually winding up. Melbourne's winding down, but regional towns and cities not far from Melbourne are actually got very strong rising markets, and this is a normal pattern. Upcycle starts in the inner city suburbs of the capital city, it ripples out to the middle ring, then it ripples out to the outer ring suburbs, and then the ripple keeps going into the regional areas. And some of these regional areas have their own reasons to grow as well. So in Tasmania, we've seen some of the regional parts of Tasmania, Sarah, actually pick up pretty strongly more recently. Hobart's been going strong for a couple of years, but we're now seeing, and northwestern Tasmania actually, or northern Tasmania, generally speaking, has stood out. I'm not specifically northwestern. I'm not sure which towns you're referring to there, but places like Devonport in the north, Ulverston, Wynyard, Burnie seems to be starting to spark to life as well. Those sorts of places are certainly starting to grow. That shows up in our latest research. But northwestern, you're probably looking a little bit further over to the west. I'm just not sure what towns you're focusing on. The most depressed part of the Tasmanian economy and property markets as well is sort of out in the west. But places like Queenstown and Zen and Rosebery, those places have really suffered, and median prices are well below 100,000 for houses, cheapest houses in Australia, just about, I think. So, yeah, right up in the north, Devonport, Burnie, those sorts of places. And obviously Launceston has been strong for a while, but some of those smaller towns are starting to come strong. Okay, so we just got to wait again for some questions to come through, because we had a flow of questions going, and then the power went off, and we had to start a new broadcast. So I'll just wait while that happens. It's interesting. I was talking earlier about forecasting. A lot of people put their forecast out into the media, particularly economists who like to pontificate on a subject they know very little about, which is residential property. And their forecasts are always lapped up by media and very quickly turned into fact. What ANZ Bank economists recently forecast in terms of quite negative outcomes for prices in Sydney and Melbourne was very quickly a statement of fact in media. It's just a forecast contradicted by a whole lot of other forecasters, I might add. But we have seen a couple come out recently and saying they think the worst is over for the slump in Sydney, rather quickly, too quickly, I would suggest. But Moody's Analytics has said it, and now Deutsche Bank has come out this week and said they think that the evidence is that the correction in Sydney, which has been underway, I suppose, for 9 or 12 months, is pretty much played out, and the worst is over, and we're now starting to kind of see it stabilising and getting back to normal. I'm not sure that I agree, but anyway, it's interesting that that's what a couple of organisations with big names are suggesting. But keep in mind, it's forecasting, and it's economists, and economists don't necessarily get residential property that well. It's not their specialist area. All right. Liam is asking, what do you believe will happen with Newcastle? Well, I think Newcastle is it's actually one of the biggest cities in Australia. It's bigger than, I think, 3 of our capital cities. It's a very strong regional city. It's a very strong economy, and it's got a massive future. Lots happening there at the moment. Big spending on infrastructure, multi-phase economy. There's so many facets to what's happening in Newcastle and the nearby Hunter region. It's a go-ahead city, and it's had probably, in the last 12 months, I've had to name the #1 property price growth area in Australia would be Newcastle. It's been, phenomenal. Many suburbs in Newcastle have had median price growth in above 20% in the last 12 months. So it's obviously had a lot of growth. It's probably going to sort of taper off a bit now as far as that goes, but in terms of the future, very, very strong for all sorts of reasons. I've got a question from Claudia about Mernda in Victoria. Mernda is one of those new development suburbs in the far north of Melbourne. It's in, I think, in Whittlesea, the Whittlesea local government area. Established suburbs in Whittlesea include places like Thomastown and Lalor and Epping. They've had amazingly strong price growth in the last 12 or 18 months. And then, as you head north from there, you've got suburbs like Mernda and Craigieburn, which are the new developing estate type areas. And Mernda is, I think, the beneficiary of an extension. They keep extending the rail line as these new suburbs are developed, and Mernda is one of those places that's been a beneficiary of that process of extending the rail links. It's at the affordable end of the Melbourne market, and it's one of the great benefits of markets up there is there's lots of jobs nodes. That enduring myth that everybody works in the CBD, so you've got to have real estate close to the CBD to have anything of value. Well, most people do not work in the CBD. Most people in any of our cities are out there working in suburban jobs nodes, and some of the biggest in Melbourne are up in those northern suburbs. Major businesses lining the Ring Road. You've got the Hume Highway. They've moved the fruit and vegetable markets up there. There's just massive jobs nodes in that area, and people. The perfect thing for the average Australian family is an affordable dwelling in an area with good services and infrastructure close to where they work. And the area you're talking about, Claudia, Mernda and neighbouring suburbs sort of ticks all those boxes. So I think it's a good place. I provide a mentoring service. So I mentor a small number of property investors with their help them develop strategies and move forward, implementing their strategies and growing their property portfolios. And one of my mentoring clients actually does own a number of blocks of land up in that area, and I think really good place to own land. Land prices are really rising very, very strongly just lately in Melbourne. Big population growth, lots of people coming to live in Melbourne, creating demand for new housing. So land's been going up, and that's one of the areas where it's happening, Claudia. So Adrian's asking, how far has the ripple travelled out from Sydney? Well, there's two things driving the big rise in regional New South Wales markets at the moment. As I mentioned earlier, Sydney obviously winding down, but many parts of regional New South Wales are cranking up. It's not just the ripple effect from Sydney. Many of these places are strong economies in their own right and have their own local reasons to grow. In terms of the ripple effect from Sydney, well, it impacted up to Newcastle, because Newcastle's within striking distance of Sydney, and it looked pretty affordable to Sydney buyers by comparison. Then you've got Wollongong down in the south, you've got the Blue Mountains out in the west, you've got the Central Coast. All those markets had uplift, partly, not totally, but partly because of a ripple effect from Sydney and the a favourable price comparison between them and Sydney. But when we go further afield to places like Wagga Wagga, Tamworth, Port Macquarie, Armidale, I think when we're seeing uplift in those markets, it probably doesn't have too much to do with a ripple effect from Sydney. It's for what's happening locally, because they're strong regional economies in their own right and have their own reasons to grow. So Liam, okay, you asked earlier about Newcastle, and I sort of talked generally about Newcastle. There's a lot of units sold last year and continuing to be sold. Do you believe this will affect the rise, be beneficial? Yeah, well, I mean, I've been watching that, Liam. There's a particularly downtown, the CBD of Newcastle. There's big changes happening there. Lots of apartments being built. And I sort of wonder, are they going to do what developers always do, build too many apartments? Probably it's going to happen in Newcastle, and that will have an impact on the sort of central city markets, but not necessarily sort of put a dampener on the overall market. It's just something I'm not sure, actually, to be honest. It's too early to know, because we're quite early in that phase of development and all the other changes that are happening in the Newcastle CBD. Certainly lots of beneficial things are happening, lots of urban renewal, movement of university campuses in there, all sorts of positive things. And we just have to wait and see as to whether the supply of new apartments is in line with the actual demand. The jury's still out on that one, I think. Anand, can you advise about buying a house in Springfield Lakes? Well, to a certain extent, it depends on whether you're buying a place to live or for investment. Certainly a lot of good reasons. If you're looking for a good area to live, Springfield Lakes, and Springfield generally has got a lot to offer. It's a master plan community. It's been a work in progress for 20 years. It's still ongoing. But right now, there's a lot in place. Lots of good quality modern housing, major shopping area, a university campus, a commercial precinct, a private hospital, and now you can get on a train around Springfield and Springfield Lakes and take a train into central Brisbane. So a lot in its favour, and the median prices for Springfield and Springfield Lakes are in the 400,000, so very affordable. So there's a lot of reasons to believe that buying in that location is going to be pretty solid. If I was thinking about that area, and actually I am personally thinking about that area for investment, I might consider some of the more established older suburbs nearby, like Redbank Plains and Goodna, where you can buy more affordably, even though Springfield Lakes and Springfield are quite affordable by big city standards. But looking for opportunities to add value, places where you can renovate or do splitter blocks, that sort of thing. I'd be also considering some of those older, more down market but cheaper suburbs like Goodna and Redbank Plains. They have other qualities to consider if you're buying for investment. But if you're buying for a place to live, or Springfield Lakes, you can do a lot worse. Hayden, interested in your thoughts on Forestfield and Perth for a mid-price property. Hayden, Forestfield is one of those areas that we do track in Perth. As you may know, we think that Perth is a city of opportunity. Prices are down, competition pretty low, but the evidence is it's coming into a recovery phase. So good time to be looking to buy in Perth. Forestfield came on our radar screen because there is a plan to have a new rail link out to there. And if that goes ahead, that's going to have a beneficial impact on that precinct in Perth. It's also close to what was probably, I'm not sure, but probably the biggest jobs node in all of Perth, and that's the Perth International Airport area. And because what happens is that it's not so much the airport, it's all the stuff that springs up around it. It becomes a massive job now, all these commercial and industrial businesses that want to be close to the airport. And the airport is an ongoing work in progress. A lot of money being spent there, expanding and upgrading. And so there's lots of jobs in that area, and Forestfield is just a little bit sort of further east from there, and pretty affordable, got its own qualities. So plenty of reasons to consider buying there. And if that rail link does in fact happen, then an extra really big reason to buy there. Yeah, Kevin, just a little bit more information about the land in Riverstone bought in 2016. I'm just not sure, Kevin, I just wonder whether you've actually had a valuation done, how you come to the conclusion that it hasn't gone up in value. Sometimes people make those assumptions for, I don't know, whatever reason, but they haven't actually tested it by getting it valued in some way. So it might be worth checking out, because you've owned it for a couple of years. There should have been some uplift in value. And if there hasn't been, the factor in play there probably is that there's just lots of new land coming into that market. And when that happens, it tends to suppress the potential for capital growth, because there's all this new supply coming into the market. Okay. All right, I'm just going to divert for a moment, talk about a few issues, just see if any more questions come through. We've actually been going for 1 hour. We normally these live Q&As go for about 60 or 70 or 80 minutes. We were interrupted by a power outage, so I'll just give it a bit more time, see if there's more people there with some questions. We had an interest rate decision this week. They've become a bit of a non-event, haven't they? For two reasons. One, they haven't made a change for so long, and it doesn't look like they're going to make any change. Some people are forecasting they won't change interest rates until 2020. So they've been on hold for, I think, 21 consecutive monthly meetings by the Reserve Bank. So it's a bit of a non-event. And the other reason why it's a non-event is that lenders are setting their own rates. It used to be that the settings of the Reserve Bank with the official cash rate pretty much dictated the level of mortgage rates, but that's no longer the case. Banks are sort of moving rates up, down and sideways all the time, and what they call out-of-cycle changes to interest rates. Whatever they do, even some small increases, which we're told we should expect perhaps from the major lenders in coming months, it's still very, very low levels compared to what has been the norm in my lifetime. So, no, yeah. But anyway, they made their decision, the Reserve Bank this weekend, and they left them on hold yet again. They haven't actually changed interest rates for a couple of years now, and it's likely to stay that way for a while, so we're told. Samantha is asking about my thoughts on North Adelaide. Samantha, I just wonder could you clarify so that I don't talk for the next 10 minutes on the wrong subject. Do you mean the suburb of North Adelaide, or do you mean the northern suburbs of Adelaide? Because the north doesn't have a capital letter there, so I'm just not sure whether you're interested in the suburb of North Adelaide, which is just outside the CBD of Adelaide, or whether you're thinking about those northern suburbs. So if you wouldn't mind just typing in a clarification, and I can give you an answer that might be useful. So Alistair, thoughts on the value of a buyer's agent can bring for interstate property investors who can't get their boots on the ground? Well, good question, Alistair. It's nice to have a question about something other than location, because 90% of the questions I get are about location, which is fine, but it's nice to have a bit of variety. I think buyer's agents are a good investment. If you're an investor and you're, say, based in Sydney and you want to buy in Brisbane and you don't have the time to get up and look around yourself, it makes a lot of sense to engage a good buyer's agent. And a good buyer's agent will be active in the area in which you're targeting, and they will know that area well, and they'll get a brief from you and understand what you're looking for and go and find property that fits the bill. And if they're good at what they do, they'll negotiate the purchase at a good price. So hopefully they'll actually get the price that you're paying down and pretty much pay their fee in terms of what they save you through being good negotiators. So I think it's well worth considering. It can be actually a case of false economy to not do it if you're sort of buying from a distance. You can still buy property interstate without actually spending a lot of time in the target market. You can do a lot of research and a lot of legwork using technology. You can protect yourself by getting a valuation done before you commit to a contract, and you can get building and pest inspections, etc., to protect yourself, make sure what you're buying is solid, and you can put conditions in purchase contracts to cover those areas as well. But I do think a good buyer's agent is a good investment, generally speaking. Hayden, Redmond Plains, you mentioned what price range for a splitter. Thinking probably more about Goodna for splitter blocks. I know you can sort of buy properties in the 300,000s that have that potential. So it's compared to what you pay in big city Australia, it's pretty attractive buying. But just the standard purchase in a place like Goodna, you're buying sort of 320,000 solid house, which maybe has renovation potential because it's an older suburb, on a decent sized block of land, close to a train station, close to the Ipswich motorway, major shopping in that area. There's lots of reasons to consider that area, I think. Okay, Samantha, you've clarified. Thank you. The northern suburbs of Adelaide, the more affordable properties. Yeah, I'm glad you asked me that, because we've actually focused on that a little bit. In fact, last night's, Samantha, last night's hotspot of the week, we do that every Tuesday evening at this time. It was actually the Playford local government area, which is in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. It's actually the fastest growing local government area in South Australia. I think it's got the most affordable housing anywhere in capital city Australia, and it's also got the highest rental yields anywhere in capital city Australia. And I think it's really worth considering. Lots of big jobs nodes up there, good infrastructure. It's got an image for being down market, and some people are bothered by that, but I think people shouldn't be scared off by that. There's some suburbs with median prices below 200,000. Others, most of them are somewhere in the low to mid 200,000 median prices. Rental yields 6.5%, 7%. You've got the Edinburgh Defence Base there. You've got big sort of logistics businesses, industrial estates, lots of jobs nodes. The Holden's car plant has closed down, but that's being repurposed. Someone's bought it and it's going to be repurposed and revitalised with new businesses. And it's possible that that closure could end up eventually being a net positive for that area. So I think that area is well worth considering. I'm certainly considering it myself for some of my investing in the near future, because just the value for money you get there is so affordable and great rental yields. And a lot of money's been spent on infrastructure up there, the road network. They're electrifying the rail line that goes through there up towards Gawler. Massive expansion of the Edinburgh RAF base. There's just so much happening there that says to me that this is a place really worth considering. So Samantha, if you're thinking about it, I'd suggest you think about it. But go to our website, check out the location reports page, and you'll find location reports on the Playford local government area, another one on the Salisbury local government area, the two main municipalities up in the northern suburbs. Get those reports perhaps and read a bit more, get a bit more detail about what's on offer up there. I think you can do a lot worse than consider those areas. So yeah, I'm going for about 70 minutes. It's been our most difficult live Q&A to date, because we had a number of technological issues, not of our own making, including the fact that the local power supply in the neighbourhood decided to shut down in the middle of it. And that's never a good thing when you're doing a live Facebook broadcast. But anyway, we got back online, lots more questions came through. Hope we've been able to be helpful. But I think it might be a good time to call a halt. Thanks everyone for your questions. There's been some good ones tonight, not just about location, but about some other issues. Hope my answers have been helpful. We'll be doing this again same time next month. Hopefully the power won't go off in the middle of it next month. In the meantime, if you'd like to find out more about some of the locations you asked about, go to the Hotspotting website. We have a location reports page, and we don't have reports in every location in Australia, just the ones that we think are worthy of note. For a small price, you can get some great detailed information and analysis of why we rate certain areas, like the Playford local government area in the northern suburbs of Adelaide that I've just been discussing, like Toowoomba. We always get questions during these live Q&As about Toowoomba, and we have recently published a report on that in response to that. So that report's available. We always get questions about what's happening with Gladstone. We have a report which actually is titled What's Happening with Gladstone, because that's one of the questions we get the most of. So you can find all those reports on our location reports page on the hotspotting.com.au website. So go there, check them out, and see if there's something there you might want to get. Okay, that's it for now. Terry Ryder from Hotspotting signing off. I do live Facebook broadcasts pretty much every day. Every Tuesday evening it's hotspot location of the week. Early in the month on a Wednesday evening it's this live Q&A, but I do other broadcasts as well, talking about whatever issues are coming up or locations that stand out. So keep your eye out for our Facebook page for future broadcasts. That's it for now. Signing off. Talk to you all again soon. Thanks. Bye.